I need some oxygen because what I'm about to say is explosive.
Well, every episode of ours is quite explosive, but I want to say that, that old saying that no one expects the Spanish Inquisition?
Yeah.
Well, no one actually expects money printer go brrr. No one actually expects the economists at the central banks in the Treasury to actually listen to those academics, to listen to the ivory tower economists telling them to print money.
The world's greatest economist is the ivory tower on top of the ivory tower. The man who wrote the defining textbook that all economists follow around the world. The number one, the premier economic mind of our generation, of our century, is of course Plucky.
Right. No one expects the Treasury to abide by the sayings of Plucky.
Stacy.
So with that, I want to point out that here's a headline, and we're going to go into this about why no one actually expected it. When I say no one, people who make decisions, financial decisions and economic decisions for the manufacturing entities, for the large corporations around the world. And you see that with Intel and TSMC on chip shortage. After blowing $84 billion on share buybacks since 2011 and now woefully behind, Intel clamors for $50 billion in subsidies for US chip industry. Intel is getting $50 billion. They're one of a few companies getting $50 billion in subsidies in the latest of the trillions of dollars package. And they're getting $50 billion to help build the foundry, build some more semiconductor chips in America. And on the other hand, TSMC which is the largest manufacturer of these semiconductor chips, which is shutting down production all over the world because of the shortages of it. What happened is they did not expect, as I won't shriek as much, but this is Plucky, and Plucky is an economist who works for the central bank and offers his advice. Never have any central banks ever actually taken his advice because it's always so absurd and he shrieks as you've heard him speak. And nobody's ever taken his advice. But these are different times. These are unique times. And they seem to be listening to his ideas about MMT and money printing and negative interest rates. So what happened is TSMC did not expect central banks or treasuries to listen to absurd economic advice, right? So they thought pandemic, global economy shuts down, therefore people aren't going to buy goods and services like washing machines, like automobiles. They didn't expect trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars to be thrown out the window at the population across America. So that's not what they were expecting. And they themselves, last year at this time, cut orders. All these manufacturers like automobile, washing machines, all that sort of stuff, they pulled their orders that we won't need semiconductor chips because everything's shut down. Well, little did they know.
There's another flip side to that story about there's money printing and then there's price signals, right? So the problem with having money printing and also near 0% or 0% interest rates is that it destroys price signals in the economy because you're saying the underlying fundamental substance of the economy, that is money. Money itself is the raw material of economics, of capitalism. You're saying it has a zero value. So therefore, if you have zero value for the substance of your economy, it's very, very difficult to build something that you can point to and say, well, that has value and that one doesn't have any value, because they're both equally valueless, because they're both based on something that has no price signal, has no intrinsic, no inherent, no economic value. And so in the case of Intel, they were allowed to buy back all their stock with 0% interest. And as such, they were not in the business of capital expense or to create more business opportunities or to hire more workers. Instead, they just played the system because they realized price signals are broken and we're going to make money by capitalizing on the largesse of the psychotics at the Plucky Bank, the first Plucky Bank, currently run by Jay Powell. So they then go into a chip shortage because the signals weren't clear to them. They become tone deaf. You involved in malinvestment and you lose track of what you do for a living. Andy Grove, who was running Intel, who founded Intel, he's long gone. The people there now can't hear the market. They don't see the market. All they know is they're getting free money. Now they're without chips, so they're scrambling. Oh, where does the money come from now to build chips to meet supply, meet demand? Oh, it's going to come from the government money printing. So it exacerbates the problem. That's why we have this Bermuda Triangle effect. All corporations are flying over the Bermuda Triangle blind, and they're just like have no idea what's going on, except they're getting free money. And the average person in America is also getting free money. 34% of all the income is transfer payments from the government. They too have no idea what's value and what's valueless. They have no idea what they're eating, for example. That's how you see the obesity problem in America. They think high fructose corn syrup is the same thing as actual food. 500 pounds, then they get sick and they wonder, how did that happen? Because you become moronic due to free money printing.
So as I said, no one expects the Spanish Inquisition. No one expects Plucky's advice to actually be taken, and it was taken. So we had manufacturers doing the thing that any manufacturer would ordinarily do if you're about to face a crisis, right? Like a pandemic, you pull your orders. You're not going to need, there's going to be no demand, obviously. Well, they were wrong. The other thing that the pandemic did expose, however, and I think that's a lot of bluster that you're seeing and all this money being thrown, is that our politicians essentially wanted to be blameless because they told us that there would be no cost to exporting basically our entire manufacturing base. And yet it exposed that there was a huge cost. We couldn't get masks. And of course, now we have the semiconductor chip shortage. The article here in Wolf Street points out that US semiconductor manufacturing has declined to where it is only 12% of the world's total now. And this is what Intel's new CEO, Pat Gelsinger, said in an interview recently, just this past week on CBS's 60 Minutes. He said, quote, "And anybody who looks at supply chains says that's a problem. It's a problem," he said, "because relying on one region, especially one as unpredictable as Asia, where 75% of the chips are made, is highly risky." So here's a guy going on CBS to basically pitch to the American public, give me $50 billion. And, those Asians can't be trusted. Like, even though I benefited from it by billions, our company benefited by billions, and they, for example, did share buybacks of $84.5 billion in the past 10 years. So $84.5 billion handed to the insiders, essentially. They didn't have to invest in CapEx. They didn't have to invest in supply chains in America because of Asia. So they benefited from now. And now they're going to the audience with a slight xenophobia of saying, hey, you don't want the Asians to get ahead. Give me $50 billion. Give me more. Everybody's, where's my money? This is the CEO level of where's my money?
Yeah, this is really a remarkable development in the last 18 months, really. It's quite sudden. So for 10 or 20 years, certainly since the Clinton years when China was let into the World Trade Organization, the idea was that China is an up-and-coming country. We need to help them out, give them a hand, and we're going to send them all of our jobs, and they'll always take our money, and there'll never be any problems. And then suddenly, within 18 months, people are saying, wait a minute, in fact, here's what we're going to say. We're going to say, in order to get more money out of the taxpayer, we're going to start this xenophobic thing going on. We're going to start attacking Chinese people as untrustworthy as a way to get more free money. And there's no end to it. It's the lies, the deception, the racism, the xenophobia, the class war that will never end as long as there's free money available.
Yeah.
Right? There's nothing that will stop you. You will say anything and do anything to get that free money.
This next bit here is so remarkable, you're not going to believe it, about what he said. So this is the incentives of this fiat structure and how it harms the entirety of the global economy, but also domestically. So here's something he said about the mistakes they've made in the past. He said in this interview on 60 Minutes and CBS, the company stumbled. We had some product stumbles, some manufacturing and process stumbles. Perhaps the biggest stumble was in the early 2000s when Steve Jobs of Apple needed chips for a new idea, the iPhone. Intel wasn't interested, and Apple went to Asia, eventually finding TSMC, the Taiwan semiconductor manufacturing company. Today is the world's most advanced chip manufacturer, producing chips that are 30% faster and more powerful than Intel's, he said. That's exactly what we've said since the very beginning of our content that we've been creating when we spoke to the likes of Michael Hudson or Paul Craig Roberts from both sides of the aisle in terms of right and left. And what they said is it's in the manufacturing process whereby innovation happens. So this company, Intel, chose not to innovate. That's too hard. That we see that across the economy now, as everybody's following Plucky's advice, is like everybody's staying home. Nobody wants to work. And by not working, you're not innovating, and you're not having to confront problems and then overcome the problems and find solutions. So it all got exported to TSMC because they were too lazy to get out of bed. They were like supermodels. We're too lazy to get out of bed. We get to just financialize our company, hollow out the company, and it's easy and free, and why should I work?
Yeah, well, let's be clear. The money that they're now being sent is a bailout.
Yes,
Right?
for those
Okay.
bad mistakes.
Right, so they made a mistake.
Yeah.
And they're getting bailed out. You see, and with capitalism, it's the situation where if you make a mistake, you get penalized,
Yes.
right? It would be like having Catholicism without hell, right?
Well, that's what, like, speaking of, no one expects the Spanish Inquisition. No one expects anybody to actually listen to dumb ideas like from Plucky.
Right, so Intel is like, so here's Intel, a mature company, throwing a fit, like, we're stupid. We're the stupidest chip manufacturer in the world. We made stupid mistakes, and we buy back our own stock. Please give us a bailout again. So I'm supposed to go into my pocket, right? I'm going into my pocket
Yes,
to help these idiots at Intel because they're stupid.
Because nobody expects anybody to follow Plucky's advice, and that is against the advice of capitalism, which is that nobody expected, like Adam Smith said, the invisible hand. You would protect yourself. You wouldn't hollow out your company and destroy your economy. Like, no one ever, and all economists ever expected that. None before Plucky ever expected that people would willingly do this.